Hi, good morning, everyone. So welcome to our third day of the Exchange Symposium for 2021. Great to have you with us. Apologies, it's taken a couple of minutes for us to join you this morning. YouTube has been putting up a bit of a fight, but hopefully we've managed to wrestle it back to the ground. And as it happens, the theme for today's session, all of the sessions today, is process, how we do it. And so it's an opportunity for us to really get under the hood. And when we're talking about how universities and communities come together, it's a chance to explore, well, the project, but the thinking and the practice that sits underneath and behind that. And so it's a real pleasure to kick off today's sessions with a partnership, a pairing between Siân Docksey, who's a stand-up comedian and writer, and she's been our Arts and Culture Creative Fellow 21-22, paired with the host for the Creative Fellowships this year, Dr Ina Linge, who's a lecturer in German at the Department of Modern Languages and Cultures and co-director of the Sexual Knowledge Unit at the University of Exeter. I should perhaps also throw in, my name's Sarah Campbell. I'm the Associate Director for Arts and Culture. So I've been working really closely with Ina and Siân over this past year. And they're going to be talking this morning about the Sex and Nature Salon, combining comedy and academia for engagement, networking and fun, which says it all in a nutshell. So the best thing to do from here is to hand over to Siân.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much, Sarah, and thanks all of you for being here today. I'll introduce myself and then hand over to Ina to also introduce herself and start off with how we came about this salon. So I'm a stand-up comedian, which in the modern world is a sit-down Zoom nuisance, maybe not for long, but who knows, in 2021. My live work typically looks at gender, sexuality, political themes with a kind of surrealist and absurdist aesthetic / take on things, trying to make big questions about identity and power as like accessible, but also just like fun and silly as possible. So this creative fellowship, which I'd never heard of before as a concept, sort of landed in my lap really amazingly as an incredible opportunity to connect with, well, Ina and all the amazing researchers she's connected with, and just this incredible research on stuff that I'd been writing about and performing about without really any awareness that there was this much academic content about. So yeah, I had a kind of cosmic joining of the dots experience over the course of this fellowship. And as we'll go into detail about, as I'm sure is the case with everyone in this room, the kind of creative / existential process of how you put your work online, make fun events, like meaningful interactions for people in this digital landscape that we've all been kind of like hurled into, yeah, has been a bit of a like brain explosion. But what we found in the project that we're developing is that it's also an amazing opportunity because we've been able to experiment with making the digital space playful, a space for exchanging ideas, and also just bringing on a load of really funny people to take insights from research and academia and transform those into an interactive comedy experience and an informal social space. So that's me and some of my things. I'll hand over to Ina to say hello.
Hi everyone, my name's Ina Linge. And we promised to talk today about the Sex and Nature Salon and tell you a little bit about the sort of online interactive event format that we developed over the last 9 months, and to tell you a little bit about process. But we thought it might be quite useful to do what Siân's already started, to tell you a little bit about where we come from individually and then how we came together as part of this creative fellowship. So as Sarah already said, the salon came out of a collaboration between myself and Siân as part of Exeter's Arts and Culture program. So each year, Arts and Culture invites academics across the university to apply to host a creative fellowship, which then allows them to work with a creative fellow from any creative background, which is quite exciting. And last summer, I applied with a project called the Politics of Sexual Nature, and that's how I was matched with Siân. So before we delve into the salon, I thought I'll say a little bit about sort of what I brought to the fellowship and why I applied. So I'm a lecturer in German at Exeter, and my work very broadly focuses on early 20th century sexual knowledge production in and beyond Germany. And I'm really interested in the parallels between historical discussions of sexual and gender diversity and how we understand those topics today. So in my new research projects, I kind of want to explore how concepts of sex, gender, and sexuality were formed in the early 20th century by also looking at the natural world, by looking at the environment, by investigating non-human animal sexuality, gender expression, whatever that might mean in the animal world, and then translating that onto and transposing that onto human sexuality. So I'm looking at intersex butterflies in the early 20th century and how scientists and artists were really interested in that, and kind of looking at science and arts explore ideas together and co-create knowledge. And so what I brought to the fellowship was kind of a general interest in how we can think of these really important topics around sex, gender, and sexuality together with really important issues around nature, environment, non-human animals. So how do sex and nature come together? Do they have anything to say to each other? And then how is knowledge about gender and sexuality produced or created? And who is actually an expert? So how can expertise be shared? And then finally, I really just wanted to see what a creative fellow would see in this. Is this even interesting? This might be really boring. I might have nothing to say. Might not be meaningful in a different context. So I was just really interested to see how what a creative fellow would see in this material. So those are the kind of questions that I brought to my role as academic host for the Creative Fellowship. And Siân, do you want to say a bit about your perspective and maybe how we started the process?
Sure. So, as Ina mentioned, the kind of exercise was how do we fuse these ideas from her research into a creative project of some kind. And what I bring as a kind of event producer is live gigs, effectively. How do you create fun performances, events, and experiences for people? So we talked a little bit over the summer before we hit the ground running on producing things, and what we arrived at as something we were both like interested in was this idea of a kind of French literary salon. I just had all these kind of visions of people like lounging on a sofa with like a glass of wine in their hand, like talking, making friends, having a really informal kind of fun time. And we just kind of thought like, can we do that online? Like, can we create the social element? Can we create performance elements? Just can we do this? As I'm sure is the case for a lot of people over COVID, either explicitly or implicitly, a lot of our thinking has been about how to recreate meaningful connections online, either as like audiences enjoying a gig or creating communities and building relationships. And for some reason, this kind of salon notion sprung up as like a cool platform that we could experiment with. So we use that as a starting point for how can we create events that bring these important themes from Ina's research and research more broadly into an environment where academics can share about their specialist topic, and also we can bring in artists and entertainers to make it like an interactive, fun experience. And that sort of started us off on the loose format for what became our first event, which I'll talk about that one specifically in a second, was going to bring together a sort of like elements of performance, elements of academic presentations, and then some kind of like interactive element. So we could make it like a participatory experience for people. I want to say that one of the absolute gifts of being on this creative fellowship program is that we were encouraged at every point to experiment with digital platforms. So we could have played very safe from the outset and gone, okay, we'll have 2 speakers and 2 comedians and then Zoom finished and everyone go home. Whereas what we were encouraged to do was like, see if you can incorporate some interactive games. See if you can find other ways to use Zoom in a really like interactive way. Find a way of building in a guest book. We just had this incredible space to explore like what we can do. So that brings us chronologically to around, I think like September. Ina and I met in June, kind of, we're talking over August, arrived at this literary salon idea. And then around September, we were like, okay, we're going to curate and launch our first event. And because of just being kind of like zeitgeist prone, we thought, well, what do people care about? Gay penguins. We're gonna go for gay penguins as our first event theme. And so we started designing our first event, Why Are We Obsessed with Gay Penguins, which aimed to bring together some speakers on this and then comedians. And the kind of like penny drop moment was when we thought, well, we've got all of these comedians who are like out of work and floating around because of COVID. We want to do a talk on gay penguins. Why don't we just bring in some comedians and have them be the gay penguins who are there as a like fixture of this event? And that has kind of created what became this like essence of the Sex and Nature Salon. We weren't super aware of that from the beginning. We were just playing with possibilities, but we invited everyone on Zoom to come and see a mixture of speakers talking about theories around why humans are interested in gay penguins specifically, in the broader context of like nature and sexuality. Yeah, like just what is the penguin vibe? What is all of that about? And then we also were presenting 2 comics as a kind of improvised comedy character piece who became our judges for games that we played with the audience, who was sort of a thread throughout the event, responding to things going on. And to slightly foreshadow something that we'll talk about in a minute, a really interesting theme in Ina's work that kind of, it was something that materialized when we were talking, and sort of subconsciously we were finding a way of implementing this in the event, was this idea of allowing animals to have their animalness. So not just having humans looking at nature and sexuality and being like, what does this tell us about us? But trying to give the animals themselves like a voice, agency, characteristics, jokes, like bringing them as a feature into the gig. So those were our starting points. We had a lot of help as well when we were just designing this event. Our colleague Martin, who was another creative fellowship pairing, who's been experimenting with how to make academic spaces playful, gave us some amazing ideas for like games that we could play with the audience. We ended up sending people out on scavenger hunts to find something in their house that might seduce a penguin, for example. So there was all this like stuff going on, and we ended up with a first event that kind of went, people come into the Zoom room, there's a game, we were playing with building word clouds into it as well. I'd kind of open with, hey, this is what you're gonna experience. It's a kind of academic lecture meets queer comedy cabaret. Let's see what happens. We started off with Ina giving a presentation on her research. We introduced our gay penguin guests, played a game with the audience, suggested to the audience that we could build a gay nightclub, like a gay penguin nightclub over the course of the event, brought on another speaker, and yeah, created this space where talks were going on. There were games, and at the end, our gay penguin guests rounded it with a song. There was a lot going on in the first event, and because this is an exchange about process, we thought we'd do it this way, of saying what happened in the first one and then pick up what we retained from our first event to then keep developing this like literary salon nightclub idea that we were building. So yeah, I think I'll pass over to Ina to look at what we figured out from the first one and then brought into event number 2.
Sure. So I guess we noticed that there was a lot going on in the first salon, and that was great, but also it was helpful to kind of tidy up the event a little bit, and also really think about what we wanted from the event. So we wanted people to engage with the material, but also be given a space to engage with the material. Sometimes it's quite hard. I mean, the whole point of the salon was to think about how we might engage with academic topics, academic talks, in a way that isn't sort of I guess, terrifying or dry. It could be quite dry to go to an academic conference and then have to come up with questions and, you know, somehow sound like you know what you're talking about. It's quite hard. It's also, you know, not the most engaging format. So we thought, you know, how can we get people to engage with this material? And that's why we included a lot of games and kind of comedy sessions on the same topics. And the idea was really that comedy has this critical function as well, where a comedian might present on a very similar topic to an academic, and they intersect in these really interesting ways that, yeah, encourage criticism, questioning. And we wanted our audience to be part of that, to not just be an audience, but to actually be participants, creators of knowledge in this session. And as part of that, we experimented a little bit with tasks or sort of challenges. We sent people into breakout rooms. And for the first one, I think we had a few breakout rooms. They were quite short. It didn't really give people enough time to fully engage with the task. So for the second salon, we had a slightly longer break of 10 minutes. And the challenge was to create bad taxidermy friends for Lonesome George. Lonesome George was our protagonist of that salon. He's an endling, so he's the last of his species, and we thought he might be lonely, so he might need some friends. And the challenge was to create these monster friends for Lonesome George. And we told people in advance to bring sellotape, scissors, some kind of arts and crafts material, and to produce monster friends, which they did, and it was brilliant. And we had some really fantastic results of people really using everything they had at home and creating these friends. And we also played around a little bit with smaller challenges at the beginning when people come into the salon. We had a word cloud asking people I can't remember what we asked. What's the natural predator of an endling or something like that, just to get people to start engaging in ways that feel quite comfortable if you don't know the other people in the room, and then sort of gradually build it up from there. Then we had a quiz and people could submit, you know, answers in the chats, and then sort of gradually we took them into the breakout rooms, and then asked a couple of people if they wanted to say anything. And we also, because we simplified the event in that way, we had a few more moments, sort of unscripted moments with the animals kind of having a chat with the speakers, with the audience. And so the boundaries between, you know, who's the speaker, who's the audience, who's the comedian, kind of blurred, and people were talking to each other, and it wasn't really clear anymore who was leading, you know, the discussion or anything, but everyone was kind of working together in that way. And I think we're now, should we play a clip? Yeah, can we play the clip from the Lonesome George clip, please?
Intimacy. You know what? I'm not. George, come on screen, please, so you can explain yourself. What's going on? Come on, pal. Where are you?
I may have been reckless. Look, I'm out of control. Look. It's chaos, and I just want love. You know, I mean, that was quite. Can I just say, first of all, it was quite. You know, you feel vulnerable when your most intimate sexual experiences are laid bare to at least 60 people on Zoom in a scientific presentation. So, you know, it's really made me re-examine. Maybe I should have gone for that lady scientist, you know, maybe, I don't know, but, you know, at some point thinking about the past. So, yes, I would like love, actually. Love. I mean, it's Christmas, so I'd like love, actually.
Okay. Well, luckily we can help you. Really au fait with cultural memes for someone who's just been resuscitated. Listen, since you are looking for love and you have literally come out of your shell and made yourself vulnerable, we're going to do this for George. So the final game of the evening is a really, really quick audience challenge. As we know, Lonesome George is sexually dysfunctional. I have insert important tortoise masturbating information, but no, you've got 10 minutes of that. So he's not looking for a sexual partner. He's looking for more of a long-term platonic companion. So the audience challenge is, with the wonderful...
Thanks so much, Lois, for sharing that. Hi. So, go on, Ina, sorry.
I was just going to say that I'll hand back to you in a second, Siân. But I just wanted to say that the speakers also had no idea that Lonesome George was going to talk back, so they just gave this presentation and had no idea that our tortoise comedian would actually have issues with that. So that was quite interesting to see how that unfolded.
We wanted to share that clip with you because, as I mentioned, for me, what was really interesting about working with Ina's research was this idea of animalness and this moment that happened completely spontaneously where we had some academic presentations and then sections on a tortoise's sex life, when then this comedian as a tortoise kind of like tanked our gig, like they really reacted against the format. I thought that really brought the material from the research and this like creative format together. So that was a nice little instance of spontaneity. Okay, so I'm going to bring you back kind of chronologically to where we were with that when that video clip happened. We did a first event which was themed around gay penguins, and we kind of threw everything at it. We were like, okay, there's going to be talks, we're going to have the gay penguins, we'll have games, we'll end on a song, we'll ask the audience to create a penguin drag king, because why not? We'll have a guest book. There was loads and loads of stuff. As Ina mentioned, with our second event, we became a bit more focused around making very clear asks of the participants and incorporating tasks. So, yeah, I mean, you'll know, just Zoom is, the online space is weird, and you have to kind of do this thing of making it as simple as possible for people, so then you can expand. So yeah, we kind of found some more structural things to embed in this salon, like having breakout rooms with audiences in teams, for example, and yeah, very kind of just like clear little plugins. So we've done 2 events, one where our tortoise exploded in this moment of complete artistic elation for me. This brings us to event number 3. We thought, okay, cool, we're going to do one more Sex and Nature Salon as part of this like development process in our creative fellowship. What have we learned? And we had kind of arrived at this structure where audiences come in. What they get first is an introduction to the themes that a researcher is really interested in that tell us something about sex and nature. And then we have that kind of knowledge at the top. What then comedians do in character as animals, or other comics doing a set, is they then use those bits of information to like build an interactive experience with the audience. So at that point in time, we had kind of like stumbled across that as like, okay, cool, this is a really good scaffolding. And we also, in our third event, we brought back something that we had realized was really good about our first event in hindsight, which is that the animals who are our guests and who are the kind of subject of a presentation and the themes of the show, it just gives a sense of like cohesion with all of this stuff happening if they both kind of open and close the event. So at our Gay Penguins event, we met the gay penguins at the beginning, and then after everything had kind of gone down, they then closed the event with a song. With our third event, we thought, okay, we have to replicate that. So at the very beginning, we had a wonderful speaker talk about gay frogs, hormones in water, all this incredible stuff. Our gay frogs then had like a fun banter. We then went off into a sort of gay frogs versus Bernie Sanders tangent, says she, after literally just telling you that we tried to keep it simple. Now, there was a lot of other like stuff going on, but yeah, we then kind of used that thing at the beginning of like the gay frogs framing the whole event to close the event again. So we'd like to just play you an extract of that salon where the animals once again engaged with a researcher, and comedians in character kind of like picked out elements of her talk, which we then used to keep building this interactive experience with the audience. Lois, could we please play the second clip? Thank you.
To environmentalist earnestness, environmentalist seriousness. And the frog pushes us instead to think about how we might communicate environmental sentiments in different ways, drawing attention to the strange, the gross, the perverse, and the funny aspects of non-human nature that many of us are drawn to. Thanks.
Oh my God, Hannah, that was so incredible. Massive, massive applause for Hannah Bose. Wow. I mean, there's so much to unpack in there, and I would like to invite the floor to open for anyone who wants to drop Anna a question. If you put your camera on, that means we can see you and give us a wave. Is there anyone in the audience who... Oh, Senator Sanders, yes.
Yes, I have a question. Hannah, you did not mention the trope of the frog turning into the prince from one kiss. Now, is that because you disagree with the idea of a monarchy, much as we do in America? We disagree with it because with the French Revolution and Thomas Paine advised us we should not have a monarchy. Do you think that frogs should have their heads chopped off just in case they might be princes?
I think that's a thank you for that comment, Senator Sanders. I mean, you make a really good point, which is that this idea of frogs as transforming or as connected with other people's transformations is really part of our cultural mythology. It's part of these folk tales that kind of get adapted in loads of different forms. And I'm not sure I can weave frogs into my anti-monarchist principles, but yes, we should definitely all be Republicans and abolish the monarchy.
If I may counter that, Senator Sanders, Hannah mentioned the mass sex and the sort of like large mass orgy, nondescript orgy that frogs have. Surely this is in keeping with the socialist ideal, no?
Well, to each according to his need. If you need loads of sex, have loads of sex. That's the socialist principle.
I feel kind of, equally weighted towards potential frog disruptive and problematic monarchists there, but equally
I've never seen any spawn porn.
Wait till later in the show. We may have a couple of surprises.
I can't wait.
Mittens on. Okay. Thank you, Senator Sanders. Well, I suppose that it's only fair to ask the subject of the talk if they have any responses. If I can invite our frogs back onto the screen. Do you have any questions for Hannah, objections or comments?
I think I have several. Well, firstly, just to kind of come back to just a bit of a clarificatory point regarding the frog orgy, that as you put, Sean, it's less of an orgy so much as it is a carnal offering to the frog god, is probably what I'd say. But
really
that's why we're here. We're here for the cultural sort of nuances. Well, I guess the question that I'd be interested to ask Hannah is, do you think that
That's an extract from our Gay Frogs event. I just want to say a massive thank you at this point to Lois and Stephanie, who were not aware they would be sharing these YouTube videos this morning. And it's a lot of frog spawn for 10 a.m. on a Friday morning. So I hope that gives you a sense of the combination that we were trying to arrive at with the salon of really like meaty investigative research that is then disrupted in a really playful way. Dr. Hannah Boast handled that incredibly well. By the way, we did not bake into our format a Bernie Sanders a Bernie Sanders interjection, and she just rolled with it, which was really cool. So to contextualize and summarize, that's what I was trying to get at with, like, how do we find these themes from an academic talk and then make them light, make them playful, make them fluffy, and create spontaneous experiences in the room. As a creative producer, I wanted to just show you a little bit about the behind the scenes thinking that goes on with putting one of these events together. We were really like playing with this fellowship in like, how ambitious can we make them as humanly possible, while also kind of like everyone, we're sort of adapting in real time to putting all of our work on Zoom. Over the course of this creative fellowship, in my other life, like work outside of it, there's been a real evolution in comedy as well of, wow, how do we create live events while everyone's just stuck in their living room? And something that I really noticed is when everything went into lockdown the first time round, people were using online events as this kind of, just like a kind of awkward placeholder until we can get things rolling again. And over the course of the year, the sophistication that evolved in these spaces from, and kind of gigs online becoming really their own thing, not just a sort of holding point until we could get back to normal. There was a kind of embracing that this could be an opportunity rather than a limitation. But as you've seen, in all of these salons, there is a lot going on. And to hold both the intentions of the event of presenting educational pointers, as well as like creating an entertainment format, we needed some rigid architecture behind the scenes. So I just want to give you a quick whiz through my Zoom cue sheet. Here we go. This is a little bit what a behind the scenes preparation document looks like. We have a lot of pre-show prep going on with our technical host, lots of things enabled so the audience have a really smooth experience. And we then have this running plan with all of the different plugins that we're using, and there's a kind of host script that is open to improvisation, but also needs to be really, really rigid. So for the people who are producing this, the actual shape of the gig is very, very clear. As Ina mentioned also, when you have tasks that you present to an audience, all of the information has to be delivered incredibly clearly. Otherwise, it's just chaos. So, for example, if we're doing a quiz like this, it all just needs to hang together really, really, really neatly. Something that I have been learning from this as well is my thinking as an MC, as an event producer, is you always need to set parameters so that you're creating these little areas where, it's like a setup gag where you've got the like entertainment sections really, really focused. And it's been an amazing process to learn how that can coexist with creating meaningful, co-creating knowledge experiences. So I'll hand over to Ina for the kind of nitty-gritty process from an academic and research point of view of, how these events cultivated that.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just say a couple of things about sort of what I got out of the project and the process that we worked with. So first of all, many parts of these events serve as really interesting material. So for example, in the first salon, when we had two gay penguin friends, comedians in character as gay penguin friends, they kind of made a joke about how they're not actually a gay penguin couple, but they're just friends hanging out. And that, obviously was a joke and it's quite funny, but it's also really interesting when we think about, when we see these images of penguins at the zoo holding hands, staring into the sunset, what we're actually projecting onto nature is partnership. rather than individuality or subjectivity. So it's quite interesting to take these moments that come out of comedy and think about sort of, you know, turn them back into my own work and reflect on my own work. Or Lonesome George speaking back to the speakers and complaining about this sort of intimate analysis of his sex life is really interesting as well. And then what's been really interesting for me is also to learn more about comedy and kind of comedy as a critical function, as a method to break down boundaries of familiarity. And also some of these academic topics are actually quite hard and quite difficult. Topics like climate change, extinction, homophobia at the zoo, they're difficult topics, and there might not be the kinds of things you want to think about at 8 p.m. On a Thursday. But comedy kind of helps us to process these topics in ways that make them not easier to digest, but easier to engage with. And they kind of comedy offers a way into really difficult topics, I think. And that's been really interesting to explore. And then if you remember, one of the things that I mentioned at the beginning that I wanted to explore in the Creative Fellowship and with the Creative Fellow was the question of expertise. So who is an expert? How can expertise be shared? And it was great to see that obviously comedians were expert, but also the animals, comedians as animals, and the audience, that everyone was able to participate and create a show. I mean, the point was really that we would all create a show together, and that a lot of these parts that happened in the second part of the show, you know, the framework for them was planned, but the content we made up in the first half of the show. And that was really, really interesting and very generative. And then hopefully we can, sort of looking ahead, we can continue developing the format for users and with different audiences as well. You know, be a great alternative to an academic conference. And it's a great way of engaging different audiences. And I think Siân will say a little bit now about kind of the future of the project.
Yes. So, I mean, it's like, this has been really, really fun, and it's really exciting because over the course of figuring out these events, I mean, my kind of greedy comedy brain basically has been like popping off going like, who can we work with to do cool things around this? The example I keep kind of annoying Ina with over email is, can we work with a particle physics department and have like one photon and one electron at the gig, and the electron is a comedian being really negative all the way through? You know, it's kind of like, it's really hit off like what just kind of what we could do in this format that both conveys meaningful ideas, but also really encourages people to like let their hair down, be playful, have fun, and has been a really creative opportunity for the artists involved as well. All of our comics who we worked with, who were an animal or a guest over the course of the gig, had a very similar experience to me of going like, oh, I mean, I talk about this stuff in my stand-up, but there's literally like an academic on the west coast of the US who like researches this for a job. How did I not know this before? There's the kind of French literary salon idea coming through, which was really, really cool. I'll say one thing about what we're thinking about going forward, and then we have a little prompt for you, which I hope won't be terrifying. So going forward, we have compiled all of our learnings from these 3 events that we created as part of our Creative Fellowship into our sort of salon in a box format. Where we're at now is we have our little, you know, we have our little team, and we've got what we think is a really cool addition to a conference, for example, or we're not sure. Basically, any place that could use a salon, we're like, cool, let's make one for you. And as well as this format I've described, where it's like, okay, the neatest version of this is start with someone presenting their ideas, bring the animals, if the animals are the point of focus, into that to sort of like bring the gig to life. And then from these starting ideas from our academic, just build an interactive comedy experience with the audience. as we get more ambitious and knowledgeable about how to use online formats, we want to build in like live action karaoke. We want to build in like more sort of interactive challenges that we can do with online things. I'm particularly excited about the karaoke because, I mean, my like absolute dream would be if, say, we could like create lyrics to something based on what a researcher has said in the opening of a gig, and then have an audience member challenge to do that to like Believe by Cher. Anyway, I digress. What we thought we would do just before opening for questions, as Ina said, part of our like remit with this, and also I think a shared set of values, is to make it very participatory. So without putting you on the spot, what we thought we would do is invite anyone in this room to suggest a theme to us for a Sex and Nature Salon, and then in 3 minutes, Ina and I will build that with each other. Not to then like build the event, but we just like to show you what the kind of thought process is behind curating one of these events. So in the chat, or if anyone would like to unmute themselves, anything that you're interested in, it could be a particular animal, it could be any kind of theme around sex, nature, or something completely random. Make me and Ina suffer or work a little bit, please. We want to just kind of show you what our like thought process would be behind making a Sex and Nature Salon. So yeah, if anyone would like to suggest anything, the time is now. Please? Where? Awkward silence, as it's maybe too early on a Friday. Oh, idea for future. Yeah, that's Ina. We await your suggestions. Beavers have been reintroduced to Devon, part of a rewilding process. Ah, cool. Okay, so rewilding. Ina, should we build a beaver-themed event about rewilding?
Yes, also Kelly suggested sexual hierarchies in a beehive, which is also a great idea. So see if there's any more suggestions, just for
mutant. Oh my god, these are amazing. Mutant self-cloning, self-reproducing crayfish taking over European ponds. Oh my god, crayfish pond colonization is really strong. I don't know, I love beavers, I love beehives, I love the crayfish.
These are great topics.
Yeah.
you pick one.
No. I was going to awkwardly shuffle that responsibility on you.
Well, parthenogenesis, how many hours do we have?
Oh my god, I can't choose. Could we repeat the bees one? Because I think that would be cool. What was the theme for bees?
Sexual hierarchies in a beehive.
Sexual hierarchies in a beehive. Okay, it's going to be beehives or crayfish taking over ponds. Bees. Let's do bees.
Okay, great.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to set the timer for 3 minutes, and then let's see if at the end of the 3 minutes we've got a coherent structure for a Sex and Nature Salon event. Okay, so Ina, which academics do you know who write about bees and sexual hierarchies? So who we could invite to present at our gig?
Oh man, this is really hard. I only know that I think quite a few sexologists were thinking about bees and the hierarchies, bees and ants.
Bees,
was a sort of a strong theme. So I don't actually know parthenogenesis. Is this what bees do? Bees reproduce parthenogenetically?
There might be, I mean, so we don't have to literally name someone now, but we could open it up into environmentalism more broadly. So if there is someone who writes about saving the bees and ecosystems, maybe that person, in terms of like what is the value of bees generally, could be the person at the structure of our gig. I have an idea for, so obviously bees have to be the like animals featured as comedians. I think it could be really fun if like a sort of fight over the course of the salon could be like which bee is in charge. So it's like our bees who are guests are having like an awkward HR meeting as well, and they're like, oh my god, maybe they're having a fight over like who the queen is. So one bee is the queen at the beginning of the event, and then we have like an anti-monarchist like toppling of the queen bee that like takes place over the course of the show. Okay, what kind of tasks, as either in breakout rooms or audience challenges, could we incorporate as part of it?
I mean, some dressing up as the queen bee, no?
Yeah.
Preferably drag.
Yes, I mean, okay, Freddie Mercury bee, like we could have a bee, Freddie Mercury. The soundtrack is obviously Queen.
You can do your karaoke challenge.
We could do the karaoke challenge to Queen. Oh my God. Or we could have, the karaoke could be anti-hierarchy lyrics that we devise with the audience to the tune of God Save the Queen, the British anthem at the end. That could be interesting. I think that a dressing up challenge is really strong. So, we've got 30 seconds left. So maybe, an audience prompt could be, you need to find something in your apartment or in your house that the queen bee would wear at her coronation. Oh my God, or like a kind of crown creation exercise. That could be interesting. We've got 10 seconds. Any final thoughts on what we could do to bring it all together?
So I know an academic whose name I currently can't recall, but something modernist, insects, sexuality. We can bring her in.
Yes.
So that could be. Have we got a comedian? Have we thought of someone?
Okay, I think would have Elf Lyons, who is the kind of queen of clowning. She could be the kind of like mad sort of matriarchal bee who is constantly trying to be toppled by the other more minor bees. I think that's all right for 3 minutes. Like we've got an event layout. I hope that was maybe stressful or enjoyable. We don't know. That's the kind of thinking that would go into the creation of a Sex and Nature Salon. So join us next week for our special bee hierarchy themed event. I'm sure we can pull it together in 10 days. Thank you so much for listening to us. We have a little bit of time. So would anyone like to ask any questions? Tony Bennett singing "I've Gotta Be Me" is also very, very strong. I'm glad that our event already has a musical director.
I can ask a question. I mean, it's a fairly broad question, but any thoughts would be really helpful. So my question is, I guess, for Siân, what have you learned about comedy and working with academics? I'm always really curious when working with creative practitioners, what do you get out of this? Also, maybe what are the frustrations of it? Not regarding Ina specifically, but in generally, researchers and academics, we are, I think, a particular group of people sometimes. And I guess, how have you found that process? What have you learned through that? And Ina, the same with you. What have you learned about your research on histories of sexology, nature, sex and gender through this collaboration?
Thank you. That's such an interesting question. I think that what I've learned is that, maybe this is just Ina, but academics seem to be just very self-deprecating about how interesting this stuff is. Because for me, kind of as I said, what was amazing was suddenly being thrown into all of this knowledge and information and being like, guys, you're answering all of my questions. Why did I not know this before? So I think that without being sycophantic, I think the richness of what is going on in research for me was mind-blowing, and that was really cool. And for me, part of the incentive to continue making these kinds of events is for other artists to have that experience as well, because having these touch points of people who you've met personally, and also I think that maybe it's sort of a bit more of a nebulous thing that emerges from our gig, but I think that maybe if you've been in a room with someone and you've had the experience of God, yeah, I met you when we were trying to dress up as a penguin. That was weird. But then you have a fun email exchange. It's kind of an icebreaker, I guess, to then sort of form those relationships. I think that I suppose that what I relearned about comedy is that comedy actually has a very rigid set of rules. It's something that I guess kind of people know, but people don't really talk about. And I guess the reason I wanted to share my really neurotic Zoom cue sheet is that to create an event where you generate spontaneous laughter, the thought that needs to go into it so that there's flow, so that there's kind of peaks and troughs. Something that we learned quite quickly is that the intention of a comedian will be to like entertain, whereas the intention of a speaker will be sometimes to entertain as well. Most academics are funnier than they think they are, but also will be to kind of like, hey, inform and like amaze and fascinate and share information. And I guess like I learned quite quickly that the sort of like emotional experience of the event, the fairest thing to do is to have like a chatty fun opening so everyone relaxes, but to put our academic on first so that the audience attention is highest. It'll be like before they've had a few drinks or whatever and people are really primed. But it also means that an academic doesn't have to follow someone who's just been like shooting for laughs for 10 minutes. Like, that's not really fair. Like, it's not someone's job. Yeah, I guess like the other, I guess my third and final thing is that I have a bit of a fear of improv, if I'm honest. Like, I'm very scripted in my own work. I just like very, really tight little jokes. And so, you know, there was a bit of a shake-up for me as a like performer and curator in going, okay, give people as much to work with, but so then we can just expand out. And yeah, I guess what I relearned is just how much fun people have with that. Our Lonesome George the Tortoise, who you saw briefly, who's a friend of mine, really great comedian called Eleanor Morton, she still talks to me about how fun that gig was, which was a really lovely experience for me. Like, being able to merge these sort of worlds was, yeah, really, really, really positive, you know.
Yeah, I think maybe the first thing I want to say is that this last year has been pretty tough, I think, for most people. And to just have some fun has been like, pretty amazing. And I think that we really shouldn't underestimate that, that it is it's just nice to have a laugh and to and to bring some enjoyment and like genuine engagement to the topics that you're working on. I think was pretty amazing. And I also really enjoyed comedy was just never something I thought about, which is pretty bad. I never thought about it as an art form. I never thought about what's funny about my own work. And just because someone mentioned parthenogenesis earlier, in the talk I gave for the first salon, I talked about this text from 1925 called Ants, where there is an ant actually, the whole point is, you know, ants reproduce, this particular ant says, oh, I produce parthenogenetically, I don't know if that's the word, and the ant is making fun of humans because they need a man, and she just thought that was hilarious. And that kind of humor, those moments of laughter in these sort of historical documents is actually pretty exciting as well. And I'm not sure I would have really recognized that as, you know, for its comedic value without this fellowship. And then I really also think it's super interesting to think about comedy as a form of expertise that can work alongside academic expertise. And I think what's really hard about thinking as an academic and doing research is to like see how your work works in different contexts, see what other people might see in it. And also it's really difficult to disrupt your own work. I think it's really difficult to see it from a different angle and to think about it differently, and to have that really like funny disruptive force and critical force has been really amazing, and it sort of brought out really different aspects of my work that I wasn't seeing before. Sorry, and I think that has been really really exciting. And just generally also learning more from Siân about the state of comedy in the UK and what the pandemic has done to it, to live gigs is devastating for the sector. And I think to learn more about how we can engage with comedians at the university has been really interesting.
Could I just say one final thing just on that point, and then I'll stop shooting my mouth off. We're not the only people who are doing stuff like this. When we were thinking about the format for our Sex and Nature Salon, for me, a like template, a pre-existing template was, there is a gig in London called Stand Up Philosophy. It's an awesome gig, and the format of Stand Up Philosophy is that a philosopher talks for 15 minutes, and then there's a comedian doing 15 minutes on a theme. So for example, logic, democracy, love, justice, death, whatever. And then there's a break. And so, you know, it's kind of like comedian, academic. So these things like exist elsewhere. What we did with our format was kind of, how do we take that and also insert queer animals and then give it a kind of like cabaret vibe? So there's a lot of similar thoughts, I think, going on about how to do cross-discipline collaborations like this. Also, on a base level, it's just really lovely to chat people who don't have all the same industry moans as you. Like, I love comedians, but I can't have another conversation about train fares. Like, it's too boring. It's so much nicer to talk to people who think about, yeah, like ants making fun of people. And yeah, I think the kind of just like points of focus and sort of like intentions and priorities of different disciplines collaborating to produce something has been really cool, and there should be more of it. There we are.
I'm going to jump in there because that is a perfect high note to end on. So a huge thanks to Siân and Ina for your presentations this morning, and I'm no doubt everyone in the room is lifted. You know, it's such a great way to end the week, and seeing those clips from the salon. Bernie Saunders was just amazing, and the full recordings are on the Arts and Culture website if you'd like to see them. And also follow Siân on her website, because touring is happening in the autumn, and so you might be able to get to see live performance, which would just be an absolute gift. Thank you very much. The next session, by all means, go grab a cup of tea and come back and join us for 11:30, where we have Adventures in Time and Gender, pivoting from theatre production to podcast. And that's going to be led by the Rethinking Sexology and Transformations team at the University of Exeter. So enjoy. We will see you back in half an hour. Thank you very much. Cheers.